Hello there, listeners, and thank you for joining us on the CATCast, Chatham Area Transit's podcast where we focus on everything local transit and Chatham County. Prepare for an exhilarating journey as we present the latest episode of the CATCast, hosted by CAT's Executive Director and CEO, Faye DiMassimo. Today, you are invited to take part in a riveting conversation. Joining her are two exceptional guests. We're thrilled to introduce Melanie Wilson, Executive Director of Chatham County Metropolitan Planning Commission, and Ann Purcell, Vice Chairman of the State Transportation Board for the Georgia Department of Transportation. Together, they'll dive into discussions on transportation planning, regional development, and the visionary strides being made in shaping our community's transit landscape.
Welcome back to this episode of CATCast. I was told that this might be the Girl Power Hour today, but it's actually CATCast in the September episode, and we are delighted to have as our guest today Ann Purcell, who's the GDOT board member for our area and a great friend to transit and transportation, as well as Melanie Wilson, who's the Executive Director and CEO of the Core MPO and the Metropolitan Planning Commission. So, ladies, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We're going to have a chat about transit and transportation and the growth in our area, which is just incredible right now. We're going to start with talking a little bit about transit first. So transit is changing locally and nationally right now. You know, we started off, even before COVID, I think, the growth in Uber and Lyft and ride-hailing services really started to maybe soften that transit market a little bit. It wasn't going to be exactly the same, I think. And then, of course, COVID came, and that changed everybody's everything. What are our big takeaways in this time of change, do you think, both for transit and generally for transportation?
I think that one of the things that I'm seeing, and actually happy to finally see, is that there's more discussion now about true affordability, and that transit should be for everybody, not just for the super poor and for the ultra wealthy that end up getting the circulators for free. I think that COVID really just emphasized the importance of everybody having access to public transit, especially in some of the more urban areas where people either didn't have cars, but they needed to get around. So I think that that's probably one of the big takeaways from change. And my second one is that I think that transit, one of the things I think that transit needs to think about is the experience of taking public transit. I think that there are a lot of misnomers about it, and I know that in other communities that I've worked in, there was a lot more emphasis on the experience, having express buses to some of their business cores where you have, people with jobs that had a lot of Wi-Fi and the seating was a little bit different. People paid more for that, but they were willing to not have to drive. So it made taking public transit not something that is supposedly a bad thing to do or something for the ultra poor, but something that people understood was important for the environment as well.
I think that's true. I certainly think COVID was a game changer now, and you have that statewide perspective. Even though you represent our area, your leadership position on the GDOT board really affords you such a statewide perspective. How do you see change, not only in transit, but just transportation?
Well, the first thing I want to say about you and transit is with your master plan. That is one of the best things that any group can have, is a plan and focus. And I believe yours went out about 3 years with the plans that you're looking at and your board involvement. I see that this is something that we all need to look at. If we don't have involvement at the grassroots level, then we can't be as productive or as successful as we want to be. So I think that that is great. On the state level, as I look around, and particularly with transit, and I've been invited, particularly in the Atlanta region, to go and see some of the things that have been and are working for them. And like Melanie said, we're seeing more and more of everyone, the community involved in transit. They don't want to drive their automobile. They want to be able to be transported to their jobs and back home. They'd rather ride a bicycle or something like that. And we even have folks from GDOT that ride their bikes in the Atlanta area to come to our office in the Atlanta region. Mm-hmm. So I think that statewide is something that we're all becoming more aware of, and particularly in our rural areas. Mm-hmm. In the rural areas, transit is something that is very important to us. Yes. We see, even in our area here in the Savannah region, all the projects of infrastructure that are going on. And let me say, the other thing that I think is so important to us is funding, as you sort of hinted at in your first comments. Well, funding is very important, and the bipartisan transportation law that came into effect is an opportunity for us to have a little more additional amount of funds that are available to us, and particularly in transit. Those opportunities are there with the funding for such things as mentioned already, our workers, yes. The safety of them and the transportation of them as they are moving from their homes to work, back from work to home, or even to our generations in the past that have used it, which has been to the doctor, to get groceries. It's so important. We sometimes don't realize how important transit can be in our community and in the state of Georgia. That's why I'm so excited about your master plan. I have read through the summary, and I was very, very impressed with that for what we're doing here at CAT in the transit.
Well, thank you, Ann. One of the things that you both have underscored with your comments is this notion of choice, a customization of your trip. I think that, and the experience. That is absolutely, again, I think that goes back to some of those changes that we were seeing even before COVID in the transportation industry starting to shift a little bit. And the customization in our lives started with the cell phones, right? Yeah. All of a sudden we became used to conducting our lives on this device in our hands. And so that has driven so many things. And that brings us to, I appreciate you mentioning the Master Transit Plan. Two of our new initiatives in there are microtransit and, of course, commuter express and van pooling. So all of those things are working to not only connect anyone to a job, but connecting people to all the places that they need and want to go, including those seniors, including our students and college students. We were very intentional about making sure that we were able to make sure that students could connect to education opportunities, and especially to things like dual degree programs. The high school student whose parent may not be able to take off to take them to Georgia Southern or to Savannah State to enroll in a dual degree program, that's how their life really begins to lift. So we're excited about that. What are the critical skills needed by transportation and transit agencies and the industry to be successful in the future? So we've talked about the fact that there's sort of a shift in the ecosystem of transportation and transit. What do you think are critical skills that are going to be needed in the workforce to be responsive to that?
Well, I think to be successful is something that we're looking at already, particularly from your perspective, and that is, what is our workforce going to be looking like? What is it looking like today? And comparing it to yesterday and bringing it up to what you have today is a success story in itself. But as you have just said, I think working with getting our folks the transportation opportunities that is needed in our region is very important, particularly with the Hyundai plant coming, with all the subcontractors that are locating very close by. We've got all the opportunity to help our folks get into that workforce, but we also need to provide them the transportation to get so that they can get the training of which they need to be successful in the world that is being presented to them for the future. And that future is certainly going very rapidly, and you have already suggested some of the things in regards to the transportation to Georgia Southern, to the main campus in Statesboro, to our campus here with Savannah State, with SCAD, all that those individuals I am seeing, the younger generation, is really enjoying the opportunity to have available to them transit service.
You know, one thing that I think is one of those skills that, and I'm glad you mentioned Hyundai because that puts it front and center, is you've got to be skill building in the electric vehicle infrastructure world. And so one of the things, Savannah Tech is a part of our SMART grant that we got, a part of our agreement, and working with Savannah Tech also has an agreement with Hyundai, and we are partnering with them to make sure that we are upskilling our workforce in electric vehicles and electric maintenance and those kinds of things, but also in electric charging infrastructure development and system placement, maintenance, and so forth. That kind of upskilling in these technology-driven spaces is going to be critical, I think. Melanie?
I was just going to say that I think that some of the skills needed, as you indicated, is more emphasis on technology, but also more emphasis in understanding resiliency and the importance of that and how that all interfaces with transportation and some of the other things that are needed in order for us to be successful. I think that there needs to be a little bit more innovation. I think that people need to be able to be encouraged to think more broadly about how to make this experience of using public transportation better. What types of things will people need that are going to these new jobs? You know, have we given any thought to childcare? And it's one of those things that people always talk about, but wouldn't it be kind of cool to have a transfer center that had a daycare center that people could go with their child, get them used to taking public transportation, and have that be an experience for them, experience for you and experience to others, but it would encourage them to take public transportation, be help to that mother. You could charge in, you know, it's something different, but I think that we're going to have to start thinking more strategically, especially as we start functioning more as a region, which is crucial. I think that we also need to be thinking about the technology that is needed in order for that to happen, more 5G technology kind of along the interstate systems and roadways that will help as we transition into the future of not only cars and autonomous vehicles, but autonomous vehicles as it relates to even dealing with some of the bus and some of the possible microtransit that we continue to talk about. So I think that all of those things are things that are needed in order for us to move successfully in that transit and transportation piece of history. And I think that we also need to be looking at transit-oriented development, which is one of my big passions. I think that we have to figure out how do we get people to understand density in appropriate areas so that you have the ability to get more funding and think strategically about providing services that are needed, again, to the citizens of Chatham and Savannah, but also to the citizens of the region, because, you know, the Hyundai plant, that impacts Bullock, you know, and Chatham and Effingham and, you know, all of those areas that we cover in our NPO. I think that transit is going to have to start looking at covering with regards to services that are provided, and that the people that live in those areas, the politicians, are really going to have to figure out how to be more open to embrace transit. And again, I'm glad you're doing this because it all is about branding and what people's thoughts are about public transportation, and what people's thoughts are really about even the technology component that comes with public transportation.
Absolutely. So I think you both have brought us back to our next discussion topic, which is partnerships. You can't do anything without partnerships, and you've got to have this more holistic view of the whole system of what you're trying to accomplish. It's not just this, it's a lot of connectivity for lots of things. So let's discuss the importance of partnerships and share any success stories you might have or anything that you think is just absolutely the key ingredient in a successful partnership.
I'll start
Okay.
real quick. I think that, when I think about CORE, we're just made up of a group of partners. We partner with all the local jurisdictions within Chatham County, but also in some of the outlying areas. We're in the process of amending our boundaries, which will involve more jurisdictions coming into the fold with regards to this regional partnership. I think we're starting to look more strategically at how do we influence, again, land use decisions, getting some of these other areas to start thinking about resiliency and like, what does that mean to them? I just think that partnerships are everything. I appreciate the fact that, with you coming on board, you've embraced the partnership that we have with CAT. But yeah, we partner with a lot of folks to do a lot of things at the NPC and CORE. It's kind of a part of our existence. We do a lot of work with DOT with regards to moving things forward. We even, work and talk with the folks at the ports, because that's one of the things that people always forget about, is that they are part of that transportation network. So partnerships are crucial, especially to what we do.
I think in addition to all those local partnerships, I can't think of a more valuable partnership, both with GDOT and both with GDOT board members and GDOT board members leadership like yours, Ann, and also with Commissioner McMurray. What an extraordinary public servant and somebody who just absolutely gets it. So we have been so appreciative I've been appreciative for my whole career here in Georgia, but certainly in this role at CAT with the work that we do with GDOT as well as with all of our local partners.
Well, dittos to you also, because that's what it is with the CORE, with the MPO, with transit, with CAT, and GDOT. We are partners and we work together. But I did want to just bring up that, with the shortage that we probably all experiencing within our own staff of executive team and our team members, is that is a big concern. And I wanted to just give you an example of a partnership that we have had with that has helped us, the RLD as well as the ACOM, that they have come in because in transit in 2021, we had 8 positions that were open. And, we were trying to get those filled, but we went to these 2 companies, and with their compliance episode, their support, and the individual 2 companies, we were able to fill those 8 positions until we could go through the steps to try to ourselves have someone come and working for us in regards to a permanent situation. So talking about partnership, there's other companies out there that are there to help, but it's good to have both them and us reaching out to them. And I think that's a prime example of that. And I wanted to go back with also just saying that with what we're seeing with partnerships, going back to the issue with childcare, that is a huge, huge issue in our area for our workforce. And that's what we're concerned with, is the transportation for our workforce. But in addition, we want the workforce to be successful. And I will tell you that in Effingham County, our school system has now, we've got 2 locations. I believe one will be placed in Rincon and one will be placed in Guyton. And it's for the teachers that are teaching in the system to have child care for their children, and we keep our workforce intact. And I just wanted to bring that out because that's another partnership.
Yes.
And of course, education is so, so important. But, I can see our transit service being a huge plus, so that families, even in the outskirts, as you just brought in, that they're seeing the need also for that kind of service, a partnership, but they also beginning to see the need with all that we're seeing on our roadways today, that transit is going to be a key for success in the future.
That is, when you were bringing up some of the things that are being done to help with recruiting of workforce, you made me think of something that we did recently that is probably shouldn't be unusual when you think about it, but it used to be, you know, especially at the executive level or the management level, when you hired folks, you hired them in, and you know, you told them their start date, and you made sure they had their package and everything. But how they actually got there up until onboarding, you know, getting to a real estate person, figuring out schools, all that kind of thing. So we just recently made a hire on our executive team with a new chief of planning, and one of the very first things we did is connect her to the school district so she could have conversations about the school options. We connected her to real estate services so that their house hunt could be eased a bit, and we also connected them to their faith community so that they could begin to explore, you know, what that home would look like for them once they got here as well. They were moving up from Florida. And so I thought, and it was amazing what a difference it made in not only how that person felt about joining CAT, but I was like, it made us feel good too, because it was like we were already establishing some of their community connections that you knew would make their onboarding so much more successful. And so I think now that's going to become more just standard practice. And I'll also, we all have certainly dealt with the workplace shortages and so forth. I've got to put a big plug out there, though. As of yesterday, we had 15 new paratransit operators in training yesterday. They will be in service in 5 weeks at the end of at their training, and we have 3 new CDL and 2 other fixed route, 3 that are in the CDL class and 2 that are just in the regular fixed route training that already had their CDLs in progress right now. So we are finally starting to see some of that easing, I think. And it's interesting because I was at a presentation by the Chamber of Commerce about a month ago, and they had a gentleman in from, I believe it was in from Georgia Southern, who gave a presentation. It was sort of like the state of the economy kind of a presentation. It was very interesting to listen to because as he was sitting there showing that they're starting to all of a sudden, there's a little bit of a shift starting to occur. Finally, there are people who are looking for jobs, and there's people sort of that activity there. And I thought, well, that is interesting. He says that because in the 2 weeks before that, all of a sudden, we started seeing more people actually showing up to apply, and they were showing up for the interviews, and they were carrying through on the offers, and it was an interesting. So I'm really hopeful that period of time that we all went through coming out of COVID, where you just couldn't find staff, is really starting to that part be behind us. So that's exciting stuff.
But one of the things, though, speaking of partnerships in education, that I've always been curious about is why there really still has not been the ability to leverage those relationships with, whether it's with SCAD and with the school system. You know, SCAD has their own transit system. The school system has their own, and they're having a hard time finding people to drive the buses. And some of it is from salaries and be part-time. And I think that it's really too bad that there has not been a way to find a process that would allow there to be some co-hiring of drivers that could help the schools out with regards to bus service. You know, whether it's them have an opportunity to make a little extra money, so maybe their salary is higher, and that could be some incentive, because now you're like, wow, I can buy a house now, you know, because I've got some extra money, whereas you might not with one salary versus the other. Right. But I am hoping that in the future, as we look at those partnerships, that there's some actual
in the labor market
itself commingling in a good way of helping with the drivers and with their certifications and sharing of all of that resource, so that you don't end up finding that some child has been left because the bus driver was not there or something of that nature from the school side.
Now, one thing in our master transit plan is we worked very hard to align our fixed routes with the high schools and high school needs, so that, again, we are offering a different opportunity to take some of that burden off of the school system, because they've had the same sort of operator shortages as well.
A good partnership.
A good partnership.
Partnership.
So, last question. ladies. The economy and opportunity is booming all around us, and I don't know anybody in Georgia and very few in the country that have going on what we have going on right now. We certainly can credit that to great state leadership and just a state that is a great place to live and to work. But it's booming all around us. I mean, it's in our backyards, in our front yards, all around us. How does our infrastructure keep up with this economic boom, including transit? Ann, what do you think?
Well, I think that we need to grasp this opportunity of expansion and looking forward at what we are seeing in the vision for the future to be successful. I think that we've got to make sure that we are out there and we can sit around this table and talk about what each of us is involved in and how we are partners with what we do. But we've got to get out there and educate the public. We've got to sell our story. We have got to make sure that they know our story in regards to events that are happening, or events by, I mean, the success stories that we're all sharing this morning with what we're doing to help our community so that they have, in my mind, a better place to work and to live. But I think the point that we've got to do in the future is to keep letting people know what is being done, be available to them. And I think sometimes they're afraid to just give that first phone call. I have found, being involved in government for the last 30 years, I have kept my same email, my same cell number, and it rings all the time because I want people to be able to talk to me and share with me if they have an issue, or share with me when something is positive from the result of us all working together.
Absolutely.
So I
those are the good calls.
That's right. That's exactly right. But we've got to make sure we market what we are doing in transit, infrastructure for the state, what we're looking at as we all three work together for our community.
No, you are spot on. That is absolutely right. We can't forget about not just to do what we do, but to make sure we message it as well.
That's correct.
Very important. Melanie?
I think that we probably need to spend even more time talking with a lot of the elected officials to make sure they understand the funding needs. I think that it ends up being something that becomes an afterthought because you've got so many of the other things that are really big and glamorous. And, let's face it, transit is not that sexy. Transportation is just okay.
I beg your pardon.
But, come on. It's not like having a Hyundai plant come in or, some other big plant or whatever. But the point is that by having more conversation with some of the elected officials, there probably needs to be some further review at looking at what needs to be put in place in order to allow for the future continuation of expanding infrastructure, i.e. from a land use standpoint. When you have these big projects going on, there needs to be the opportunity to get more right away so that you're not stuck with having to go back and buy it on the back end, which adds more time to this process being able to occur quickly. And I think that if you have a little bit more of that going on, especially from the planning standpoint, again, that's why I was really happy about the fact that you guys did a transit plan. Those are things that we're looking at with regards to our update for our long-range transportation plan 2050. And those are things that probably will take some discussions with some of the elected officials at the legislature to talk about what types of things can we do in these major core areas to look at the future. How do you project out, well, we're probably going to need this corridor because we know we need to put 5G technology in, or we know we need to have an express lane, or we know we need to look at, transit or something like that, which is not necessarily done right now because it's always an afterthought. And when people get ready to do it, you spend all this time saying, well, gosh, we got to figure out how we can buy right away. We got to go and deal with all these other issues when it should be something that you get on the front end. So I think that those are opportunities. And I think that with the with the economy booming, this is when you take the opportunity
Absolutely.
to push for that, so that you can show that you're being the visionary, you're being forward thinking. Those are things that I think about from a planning and standpoint.
When you've got an economic boom too, people feel like they can move forward.
That's right.
They're not holding back and worried about what's coming next. They see all this opportunity that's happening, and they feel like it's a good place to make some confident, bold, visionary, moves and efforts. Mm-hmm. And that is I think, an excellent time.
Yeah.
I will tell you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to say too, following up with what she was saying with our legislative body, with and not just them, but also our municipalities, our counties, is that we all are aware of the funding issue. Mm-hmm. It always comes back to where our funds.
Right.
And we know with transit, the majority of those are federal funds. But we got to have a match for those federal funds.
Right.
So that's the other. That is the area that we need to make sure that we're taking, which I do believe we are, advantage of making sure we have that opportunity to at least have our name in a request for grants, whether it be on federal or state level. They're out there for any organization, but I'm pushing transit right now.
Yeah.
Well, CAT had a wildly successful year last year, both on the federal grant side and with the Georgia Transit Trust Fund, and we are deeply appreciative of both, and we're going to make those partnerships count. We're gonna make you proud with what we've gotten. I will tell you that when I think about this question that you all have touched on the points that are so important to me. For us, I think there's three pieces of how the infrastructure keeps up with the boom, including transit. The first is we are just, with everything that's happening around us, a regional approach to what we're trying to, the opportunities and challenges that we're trying to meet, and the growth that's occurring. We're going to have to move beyond metropolitan sort of focused efforts and think about this in a more regional way. And we have lots of different organizations, whether it's the core MPO and the MPC, the Coastal Regional Development Commission, CAT. You've got lots of partners out there that haven't yet been connected or brought under some sort of a real regional unified approach. And I think that that's something that, in a very intentional way, we're going to have to figure out. And on transit in particular, and one of the things that our master transit plan suggests is that as we move forward through these future years, that a regional transit authority is going to become a topic that needs to be considered, led by our local and other officials, to what is the community's desire in that regard. Of course, our plan it goes to 2050,
right.
But it has a real definition to that first 5 to 10 years, 8 years in that window of time with specifics, and then is more visionary and aspirational all the way out to 2050. The other things that I think are going to be key, and you hit on it exactly, is all the federal funds are great, but they require local match, and we don't have we don't have a reliable local match source. We have a patchwork quilt of that stuff. There's some SPLOST that may be given to us over here, and if a T-SPLOST comes about, that'll be something else. That one will be absolutely critical to us, though. But there are all these sort of really important, I don't mean to underestimate or discount them in any way, all those partnerships that we currently bring together to make the patchwork quilt that enables us to move a whole forward. But it's a lot there just needs to be a more reliable whole funding source that can help transit move effectively forward. And I'll certainly put a plug in for the T-SPLOST consideration. And then the last one, of course, is this continued workforce development. We've got to have the person power to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. We've got to have that upskilling in technical skills and other kinds of skills that we don't even know about yet, as the world continues to transform around us. So for us, the regional sort of aspect of transit, local funding, critical, and then having the person power to deliver the services and operations of all of what we have now and what we're going to be doing, especially with the opportunities around Hyundai, Commuter Express, the micro transit that we're going to be starting within Chatham County through our SMART grant and so forth. So very exciting.
And I think, just real quickly, I think that the other piece, though, too, from the standpoint of low-hanging fruit, is getting funds. I'm always trying to figure out how I can get money from, seriously, for matches. It becomes an issue for us at CORE because we know and we get excited about different projects, but we have to find somebody to sponsor for the match. But the other piece, though, is this whole issue dealing with, and we didn't really talk about it much here, but that whole social equity component that comes with it, and looking at that as part of resiliency and how we can marry those two to use as a possible source to get some additional funds that feed up to the workforce and some of these other things. So I do think that we probably miss out more here than in other places because it's now just becoming a focus, but it hasn't been in the past to really look at that whole social equity and resiliency piece. It took a while for people to understand that climate change was real and that we needed to look at a different way of looking at our infrastructure, how it's built. That's why we're doing the urban flooding model on the transportation side. We're looking at that. We'll go in for some additional funds to look at the regional piece because we're looking at expanding our boundaries. And I think at a minimum, if you're successful at just getting CAT to the SMSA or to our regional core boundaries, that by itself will be a huge accomplishment because now you're going into Bryan County, Effingham, we're dealing with all of them in some of the jurisdictions, Rankin and others, where there is the need to have that transportation piece. There is the need to deal with the equity piece. And I think that by pushing the resiliency thing, it gives us a more opportunity to get more funding from a different lens to support that.
Interestingly enough, the CAT Act that created CAT permits us to operate statewide.
Awesome.
It's not just in Chatham County, which is an interesting thing. I'm not sure why it was constructed that way, but we have a service expansion that we recently moved forward in Garden City. Mm-hmm. We have another service expansion that will be moving forward into Port Wentworth after the first of the year. The 3 micro transit zones, 2 in West Chatham and 1 in East Savannah. And then, of course, the partnership that we're building potentially right now with Hyundai for Commuter Express and van pool services. So, CAT's got a lot going on. And one of the things that you'll see in the Master Transit Plan that I'm incredibly proud of is that with the implementation of the improvements that are in the plan, the reach into the community and that equity lens that you talked about, the depth at which we can reach households that are in poverty, households without a car available, those kinds of things, the percentage reach increase is really incredible, and we're proud of it.
That's awesome.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. This has been a tremendous conversation as always, and I do think it ended up being the Girl Power Hour. I think so. I think so. Well, thank you all so much for joining us again for this episode of CATCast. We'll look forward to seeing you again in October. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that concludes today's CATCast. We extend our sincere gratitude to our esteemed guests, Melanie Wilson and Ann Purcell. Together with Faye DiMassimo, they have shed light on the visionary strides transforming our community's transit landscape. And of course, thank you to the listener for joining us in this enlightening journey. We hope that this episode has provided you with valuable insights into transportation planning, regional development, and the collaborative efforts driving positive change in Chatham County. There will be more exciting episodes to come. Until then, take care and catch a cat.